If I could turn back time, I would change one thing. I would never have agreed to move into a nursing home. I know it might seem like a safe choice, but there are truths no one tells you. And today, I'm going to tell you everything. At the time, it seemed like the right decision. My children insisted it would be the best thing for me. They said I would have full care, safety, comfort, that I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. And I admit, for a moment, I believed them. I thought it would be easier. I believed I would be treated with dignity, that my routine would remain somewhat similar to the life I had always lived. But the reality I found was completely different. On the first day, as I crossed that door, I felt a chill in my stomach. The room was small, with white walls that looked more like a hospital. The narrow bed, the lifeless wardrobe, an empty nightstand. Instead of photos or memories, there was just a small plaque with my name, as if my identity had been reduced to that. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a home. It was just a place where they had put me. My name was written on a small plaque on the door, but inside I didn't recognize myself in that place. It felt like I had left an essential part of me outside, and in that moment, a doubt struck me like lightning. Did I make the right choice? The answer came quickly, and unfortunately, it wasn't the one I wanted to hear. The first few days were about adaptation. They convinced me that I would soon get used to it. I tried to go with the flow, understand the rules, respect the schedule, but each new instruction, each new limitation, felt like a piece of my old self being ripped away. Small things I hadn't even noticed before, like deciding when to take a bath or choosing what I wanted to eat, became privileges, not rights, and before I knew it, I was no longer the man who had walked in there. I had become someone who simply accepted the rules and followed orders. At first, my grandchildren would run to hug me as soon as they arrived. My children came every week, bringing news and smiles. But over time, the hugs became shorter. The visits, more rare. "Dad, this week has been crazy, but we'll come next week, okay?" And next week turned into a month. Then 2. One day, I realized I had spent an entire birthday waiting for someone to show up, but the door never opened. The world outside kept moving, and mine just stopped. Time. That's a curious detail. At first, I thought the days would pass faster inside the nursing home, but they didn't. They dragged on. One just like the other, with no news, no surprises. Just a continuous cycle of waiting. Waiting for breakfast, waiting for lunch, waiting for the next meal, waiting for a visit that might never come. It didn't take long for me to realize that this place wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what they had promised me. And that, if I had the chance to go back, I would have fought with all my strength not to be there. But now it was too late. What I didn't know when I entered, and what I want to share with you now, are the truths no one tells you about living in a nursing home. If you think this might be an option for you or someone you love, then you need to hear this, because there are things that, once lost, are impossible to recover. The illusion of safety. I always believed that, as I aged, safety would become one of my top priorities. After all, we've all heard the stories about falls at home, about elderly people living alone and facing medical emergencies with no one around to help. And it was exactly this fear that my children used to convince me to move to the nursing home. "Dad, you'll be surrounded by trained professionals. There will always be someone to help you with whatever you need," they said. "It will be safer for you." At the time, it made sense. The idea of being in a monitored environment with doctors and nurses on hand seemed to guarantee that I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. But what I didn't know was that this sense of safety was, in many ways, just an illusion. The very first week, I realized that the care wasn't what I had imagined. Yes, there were nurses and caregivers, but they were always overwhelmed. When I needed something, it wasn't enough to simply call and be attended to. Often, I had to wait, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. At first, I thought it was just an isolated incident, that maybe I had asked for help at an inconvenient time. But as the days passed, I realized that this was the norm. Each resident had to fit into the nursing home's rhythm, not the other way around. And when it comes to health, waiting can make all the difference. There was one night when I started feeling a sharp pain in my chest, something I had never felt before. I pressed the emergency button by my bed and tried to stay calm. The minutes passed, but no one came. I pressed it again, and still nothing. After almost 20 minutes, a caregiver finally entered the room. He looked at me and said he would call someone to evaluate the situation. A few more minutes passed before a nurse came and checked my blood pressure. She said everything was fine and that it was probably just indigestion. No doctor was called. I lay there trying to believe that it really wasn't serious. But deep down, a growing unease settled in me. If it had been something serious, would I have been attended to in time? If I had been at home, I would have called an ambulance directly. But here, I depended on the system's bureaucracy, and I wasn't the only one going through this. I met a man named Ernesto who lived in the room next to mine. One day, he fell in the bathroom and hit his knee hard. He called for help immediately, but it took so long for them to attend to him that by the time they finally took him to the hospital, the fracture was worse than it should have been. He spent weeks unable to walk properly, and it affected him deeply. Ernesto was an active man. He liked to walk the halls and talk to other residents. But after that incident, he started avoiding getting out of bed. The loss of mobility discouraged him so much that he simply gave up. From that moment on, he was no longer the same. Over time, I came to realize that the idea of a nursing home being a safe place is, in fact, an empty promise. Yes, there is a structure. Yes, there are people working there. But the safety I truly needed, the feeling that if something happened, someone would be there promptly to help me, that safety never came. I was just one among many, waiting my turn in the line for care, hoping that on the day something really serious happened, I would be lucky enough to be attended to in time. If I had known this before, I would have thought twice before coming here. I would have explored other options. I would have invested in a private caregiver, made adaptations to my home, looked for alternatives to stay safe without giving up my space, my life, my rhythm. Because the truth is that safety isn't just about having doctors nearby. True safety is knowing that you have the autonomy to act when you need to, that your needs are a priority and not just an item on someone's to-do list. But that, unfortunately, I only discovered too late. Loss of independence and control over my own life. At first, I tried to convince myself that nothing would change that much. I thought that even inside the nursing home, I would still have some control over my routine, over my choices. But I quickly realized that my independence wasn't just reduced, it was practically ripped away from me. Small decisions that used to be automatic now had to go through rules, permissions, and bureaucracies that made me feel like I was no longer in charge of my own life. Before moving here, my day started my way. If I wanted to wake up early to watch the sunrise, I did. If I was tired and wanted to sleep more, I slept. But here, the alarm goes off at the same time every day. You might be sleepy or not, you might feel up to it or not. It doesn't matter. Breakfast will be served at that time, and if you miss it, you'll have to wait for the next meal. Time here is no longer mine, and that was one of the hardest losses to accept. We wake up at the same time, even if sleep still weighs heavy on our eyes. Breakfast is served promptly, and if you're not in the dining room at the right time, you might have to wait until the next meal. And it doesn't matter if you're not hungry at that moment. The food is served, and you have to accept it. If you want something else, tough luck. The menu has already been decided by someone who never asked what you like. I remember one morning in particular, when I woke up a bit later than usual. I was feeling unwell and wanted to rest a little more. But minutes later, a caregiver came into the room and told me to get up. "It's past breakfast time. We need to get organized for the day's activities," she said in a gentle but firm tone. I wanted to tell her I didn't want any activities that day, that I just wanted some time for myself. But then I realized that inside this place, my wishes didn't matter. Another blow to my independence was the need to ask for permission to go out. I always enjoyed walking. Before, I used to take a stroll around the neighborhood after lunch, breathe some fresh air, watch people coming and going. But here, that freedom was gone. To go out, you have to notify them in advance, wait for a staff member to be available to accompany you, if you're even allowed to go out, of course. The feeling of needing permission for something as simple as feeling the wind on your face is suffocating. It might seem trivial to someone who's never experienced it, but when you lose that kind of autonomy, you start to realize how valuable it was. Even trivial things, like choosing what to wear, became a problem. One day, I grabbed my favorite shirt from the wardrobe, a blue shirt that had always been with me during special moments. But the staff member told me that the fabric might be uncomfortable for the day and suggested I wear something else. She insisted so much that, to avoid an argument, I gave in. It seems like a small thing, but in that moment I felt like a child being told how to dress. That's when I realized I was no longer seen as an adult with my own desires. I was just another resident following rules that were created to make the nursing home's routine easier, not my life. Over time, I learned not to argue. At first, I complained, tried to reason with them, but I soon realized my words wouldn't change anything. So, little by little, I adapted. I stopped questioning the schedule, stopped challenging the limitations, accepted the imposed routine. And without realizing it, I lost a piece of myself every day. Today, I understand that the problem isn't just the lack of physical freedom, but the loss of the right to decide about my own existence. If I had known it would be like this, I would have fought to stay in my home for as long as possible. I would have hired a caregiver who respected my way of living, instead of surrendering to a system where my autonomy has no value. Because losing independence doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, in every small decision you can no longer make. And one day, you realize you've become just a number on a list, waiting your turn to live what they still allow you to live. Feeling forgotten by family. At first, when I moved here, my family visited often. My children came almost every week, and my grandchildren visited on weekends. In the beginning, I still felt like part of their lives. I would sit in the dining room and share stories from my past, listen to their news, see the sparkle in the children's eyes as they told me about school, friends, and the dreams they were building. I clung to those moments because they gave me the feeling that I still had a place in the world, that despite everything, I was still important to someone. But over time, those visits became less frequent. First, they started canceling at the last minute. "Dad, we can't make it today. Something came up," they would say. Then, phone calls started replacing visits. "Sorry, Grandpa, it's been a busy week, but I promise I'll come next time." At first, I tried to understand. I know life goes on for those on the outside. My children have jobs, kids to raise, their own worries. But for me, time didn't move. The same way. Inside here, the days are long, and every moment of waiting feels like an eternity. I would wake up hoping that today would be the day I'd see a familiar face walk through the door. But as the months passed, that hope became a burden. I tried not to show it, tried to smile and say everything was fine, but inside, something in me was fading. The holidays were the worst. At Christmas, they set up a small tree in the common room. Some residents received visits, others didn't. I waited, staring at the door, imagining my family arriving. But no one came. At the end of the day, a staff member handed me a gift my daughter had sent by mail. It was a sweater accompanied by a note that said, "Merry Christmas, Dad. We miss you. We love you." I held that paper in my hands, read the words over and over, but I couldn't feel the warmth of the love they said was there. Because real love isn't just a gift sent from afar. Love is felt in presence, in touch, in a glance. love is knowing that someone made the effort to be by your side. After that day, I stopped hoping so much. I learned to accept that, for many, life goes on as usual, while ours simply slows down. When you're present every day, it's easy to be remembered. But when you're away, you become just an occasional memory, something that can be postponed. Until next week, next month, until one day they realize they haven't visited in so long that they don't even know what to say when they finally see you. I saw this happening with other residents too. There was a man named Vicente, who used to sit near the entrance whenever visitation hours came. He would watch every person who entered, hoping that maybe today someone would come to see him, but it almost never happened. When I asked about his family, he smiled, a sad smile, and said, "They say they love me, but they always have something more important to do." Those words stuck with me because I felt the same. I knew my family loved me, but did they really miss me? Did they still think of me when there wasn't a special occasion to remember? Over time, I stopped insisting. I started answering the phone, with a shorter tone, not showing how much it hurt to know that was the only connection I had left. I started automatically saying, "I'm fine," even when I wasn't. And somehow, I resigned myself to this gradual forgetting, because I realized that no matter how much they loved me, I was no longer part of their daily lives. I had become someone who existed at a distance, a memory that could be accessed when convenient. But most of the time, I was just that, a memory. If I could go back in time, I would have fought to stay at home. I would have found a way to remain present in my family's life without depending on visitation hours or rushed phone calls. Because no one warns you that when you enter a nursing home, you become less visible to those who once said they would never leave you alone. But that's the reality. And when you realize it, it's already too late to change. Life becomes purposeless. Wadey thought the biggest change when I moved here would be the environment. A new room, new rules, new people. But what really changed was something no one sees. I lost my sense of purpose. Before, my day had meaning. I made my coffee, read the newspaper on the porch, chatted with the neighbors. Now, my biggest event is waiting. Waiting for breakfast. Waiting for lunch. Waiting for dinner. Waiting for nothing. Because deep down, inside here, we're just waiting for time to pass. Before coming here, I had a routine. Small things that made my days worthwhile. I liked waking up and making my own coffee, watering the plants in the yard, reading the newspaper on the porch. Sometimes I'd go out to buy bread, chat with the neighbors, feel the world moving around me. I was still part of it. But inside here, that connection to life faded. And little by little, I became just someone who waits. At first, I tried to keep busy. I participated in the activities they organized, played a few games of dominoes, did the exercises the physical therapist suggested. But none of that filled the void growing inside me. Because these weren't activities I had chosen. They were distractions planned to keep us occupied. But that, deep down, only reinforced the truth no one wanted to admit. We were just there, waiting for time to pass. And when life becomes just waiting, you start to wonder if it's still worth being here. I saw this happening with other residents. One of them was Mr. Anselmo, a man who, before coming here, loved gardening. He used to talk about the flowers he grew at home, the trees he had planted over the years. But in the nursing home, there was no garden to tend to, just a lawn maintained by staff. He offered to help, but they said it wasn't allowed, that he should just relax and enjoy the facility. And so, without anything to do, he stopped talking about his plants. He stopped going out to the yard. He just sat on the same bench every day staring at the ground as if waiting for something to happen. But nothing ever did. Life inside the nursing home has a different rhythm. For those outside, the days pass quickly, full of commitments, problems to solve. But for us inside, time drags on. The mornings are long. the afternoons even longer. You find yourself trapped in a routine that doesn't change, in an existence without challenges, without novelty, without meaning. At first, I tried to find something that motivated me. I asked for a notebook to write in, tried to read more books, but without a real purpose, even those activities lost their appeal. There was nothing to look forward to except the next meal, the next night's sleep, the next day just like the one before. The worst part is that when you stop having a purpose, your body feels it. Your spirit weakens. Your energy fades. I remember one day when I woke up and simply didn't feel like getting out of bed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, asking myself what the point of getting up was. Because deep down, I knew nothing new would happen. That's when I realized it wasn't just a passing feeling. It was a harsh and cruel truth. When they take away your purpose, they take away your life before it's even over. If I could go back, I would have done everything to keep my sense of purpose. I would have found a way to remain useful, to continue contributing to something bigger than this endless waiting. Because no one warns you that when you enter a nursing home, you're not just changing houses. You're leaving behind everything that made you feel alive. And when you realize it, you've already been too long without knowing how to go back to being who you were. Rapid decline in physical health before. Moving here, I still felt active. I wasn't a young man, of course, but I could manage almost everything on my own. I enjoyed taking a short walk every morning, made a point of preparing my own meals, tidied my bed, and even washed my own clothes from time to time. Small tasks that kept my body moving and my mind occupied, all thanks to the homeopathy I used, which made me feel this way. But when I came to the nursing home, I realized that excessive comfort can be a dangerous trap. In a short time, I began to notice something frightening. My body was getting weaker, my energy was declining, and tasks that were once simple became difficult. They took away my homeopathy, which was entirely natural. If you want to know more about it, see the pinned comment. When I arrived here, I could walk without difficulty. I got up on my own, did small chores, but without realizing it, my body started giving up. First, I started sitting more, then walking less. My legs, which used to take me anywhere, started to fail. Until one day, when I tried to get up from the chair, I felt something I had never felt before. Weakness. Suddenly, what I'd always done automatically became an effort, and it wasn't just me. I saw friends who arrived here walking steadily, and months later needing a walker. Some didn't even notice the exact moment they switched from a regular chair to a wheelchair. But I did. I saw people who, when they arrived, could eat without help, but over time needed someone to cut their food. Not because they were sick, but because they stopped using their hands for simple tasks. And when you stop using a part of your body, it starts to wither. The nursing home provides everything so you don't have to worry. Meals are served at the table. Clothes are washed for you. Beds are made every day. There's no need to cook, clean, or move much. At first, this seems like a relief, but over time, you realize the price of it. When I stopped getting up to cook, I noticed I was sitting longer than before. When I stopped doing my small chores, I noticed my arms didn't have the same strength anymore. And before I knew it, getting up from the chair became an effort. Walking to the yard started to feel tiring. My legs, which used to take me everywhere, started to fail. And I wasn't the only one going through this. One of the cases that struck me the most was that of a woman named Donna Celia. When she arrived, she was full of life. She said she wouldn't let age win and walk the halls every day. She insisted on doing everything herself, and some staff members even laughed, saying she didn't need to try so hard. But over time, the encouragement for her to rest increased. "Why don't you let us take care of that?" they said. "You don't need to worry, we're here to help." Little by little, she started accepting that help. One day, she stopped walking the halls. Then, she preferred to sit during activities. Then, one day, I saw her using a walker. A month later, a wheelchair. And one day, without anyone noticing, Donna Celia was no longer the same. The woman, full of energy, became someone who just waited to be taken from one place to another, and I saw this happening to me too. At first, I tried to keep moving, but when everything around you is designed so you don't have to make an effort, your strength disappears without you noticing. The body weakens when it's not used, and when you realize it, it's already too late to reverse the process. When I realized I was losing my strength, I tried to fight back, but it wasn't so easy anymore. What used to be a simple habit now required effort. Walking down the hall felt like a challenge. Getting out of bed was a hassle. Everything I used to do automatically before coming here now required concentration and strength, as if my body had given up before I did. If I had known this before, I would have insisted more on staying active. I would have found ways to keep my body moving, even in an environment where everything pushed me to stop, because no one tells you that comfort can destroy you, that when you stop fighting to stay on your feet, life pushes you into a wheelchair, faster than you imagine. And when you reach that point, reversing the situation becomes almost impossible. Loss of privacy and dignity. One of the things I valued most when I lived alone was my privacy. My space, my rules, my time. If I wanted to spend the afternoon in silence, no one bothered me. If I decided to take a shower later, no problem. Everything was my way. But when I moved to the nursing home, I realized that this was a luxury I would never have again. No one warned me that by entering here, I wouldn't just lose my independence, but also my dignity. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a matter of adaptation, but I quickly realized that within these walls, privacy doesn't exist. Staff members enter the room without knocking, without waiting for me to respond. They say it's to ensure my safety, but what I really felt was that my individuality no longer mattered. In no time, I became just another resident in a line, a name on a list, someone who needed to be monitored at all times. I always took showers alone. It was always my moment. But here, even that was taken from me. The time is fixed, and if I want to shower later, I can't. And the worst part isn't the schedule. It's the presence. Someone there, standing, watching me, for my safety. On the first day, I tried to refuse. It's okay, I can do it alone. But it didn't work. The door opened and there was a staff member ready to help me. In that moment, I felt something I had never felt before: shame for who I was. As if suddenly I was no longer a man, just a body to be cared for. I remember my first assisted shower. The feeling of helplessness was unbearable. I, a man who had spent his entire life taking care of himself, now needed someone to hold my arm so I wouldn't slip. It's for your safety, they told me. But all I felt was shame. The loss of privacy didn't stop there. The room, which should have been my space, was shared. My roommate was an old man who snored loudly and had habits completely different from mine. At night, I wanted to read, but he wanted to sleep in the dark. In the morning, I wanted to rest a bit more, but he liked to wake up early and chat, and I couldn't do anything about it. I simply had to accept that my time, my wishes, and even my peace were no longer exclusively mine. And then came the small daily humiliations. Having to ask for help to go to the bathroom when I felt weak. Having to wait for someone to dress me when I couldn't put on my own shoes. Hearing staff members talking about us as if we were children, incapable of understanding what was happening. All of this slowly stole a piece of who I was. Because when you lose control over such basic things, you start to wonder, who am I now? I saw this happening to others too. One of them was Mr. Antonio, a proud man who had always been independent. At first, he tried to maintain his routine, dress himself, do everything without help. But after a while, I noticed he started giving up. He accepted having his clothes put on without complaining. He accepted being spoken to as if he were a child. And one day, when I needed him to talk, I noticed there was no longer any spark in his eyes. The loss of privacy turned into the loss of identity. And the worst part is that when you get used to being treated as someone incapable, you start to believe it too. If I had known how much this would affect my dignity, I would have done everything to stay in my own space. I would have insisted on alternatives that allowed me to age without having to give up my autonomy. Because no one tells you that when you enter a nursing home, you don't just lose privacy. You lose the sense of being yourself. And when that happens, there's no going back. Discovering that leaving the nursing home is almost impossible. When I moved to the nursing home, I thought it would be temporary, a phase, a period of adjustment until I decided what I really wanted. My children said that if I didn't get used to it, I could leave at any time. I believed that. I thought that if I didn't like the routine, if I missed my home, I could just pack my bags and leave. But what I didn't know, and what no one told me, was that leaving the nursing home wasn't as simple as entering. At first, I told myself, if I don't like it, I can leave at any time. But the truth is that leaving here is much harder than entering. I thought about my home, my armchair, the smell of my coffee. But one day, the shock came. My children started getting rid of my things. First, it was a piece of furniture, then another, until one day I realized my home was no longer mine. It was still there, but I no longer belonged to it. And then, the worst doubt arose. Even if I could leave, would I still know how to live out there? My children started selling my furniture, getting rid of objects I had spent years collecting. Dad, we thought it would be better this way. The house was too empty. I wasn't consulted. They simply told me it was best for me. And then, little by little, I realized I no longer had a home to return to. Besides, my strength wasn't the same anymore. After months of living in an environment where I didn't have to make an effort for anything, I realized I had become more dependent. If before I could climb stairs without problems, now I needed more time to get out of bed. If before I cooked my own meals, now I wasn't sure if I could stand long enough to prepare something. And then came the doubt that destroyed me from within. Would I still be able to live on my own? Or had I become someone incapable of taking care of myself? It wasn't just a physical issue. Time inside the nursing home changes how you see the outside world. When I entered, I had a routine, knew my neighbors, knew where to go if I needed help. But over time, all of that became distant. The streets that were once familiar now seemed strange. The friends I used to visit were no longer around. The neighborhood where I had lived for so many years was no longer the same. The feeling was that while I was inside here, the world kept spinning without me. And when you feel like a stranger in your own life, going back home stops being a real option. I saw many other residents going through the same situation. People who entered thinking it was a temporary decision, but when they tried to leave, they realized they had nowhere to go. Some even tried to return to their children's homes, but found there was no longer any space for them. Others, without enough money to hire help at home, realized that the only option was to stay here, accepting that this was the place where they would spend the rest of their days. And then I understood the cruelest truth about nursing homes. Entering is easy, but leaving is almost impossible. Because even if one day you decide to leave, the time you spent here has already changed you. You're no longer the same. Your old life no longer exists the way you remembered it. And before you know it, you find yourself accepting the reality that this is your new home, even if it was never your choice. If I could go back in time, I would have thought twice before believing this would just be a phase. I would have done everything to maintain my independence, to stay in my home, to find solutions that wouldn't lead me down this irreversible path. Because no one tells you that when you enter a nursing home, you're not just changing addresses. You're, without realizing it, closing the doors to the life you once knew. And when you finally realize it, it's already too late to go back. I look back and realize I don't regret growing old. Time passes for everyone, and accepting that is part of life. What really hurts is having believed that a nursing home would be the best option for me. I entered thinking I would be safer, that I would have company, that my quality of life would improve. But instead, I lost what I valued most: my independence, my privacy, my sense of purpose, and above all, the freedom to decide how I wanted to live my final years. If I could give one piece of advice, it would be this: don't trade your freedom for an empty promise. Safety isn't just a roof and a controlled routine. True safety is being able to decide how you want to live, because in the end, no matter how old we are, we all want the same thing: to truly live until the very last day. So, if you still have a choice, choose to remain the owner of your own life before it's too late. The truth no one tells us is that once inside a nursing home, it's not easy to leave. You adapt to the imposed routine. Your strength diminishes. Your family moves on with their lives, and without realizing it, you become part of a system where the days repeat themselves and personal desires no longer matter. And when you realize it, you no longer have the strength to reverse the situation. Does this mean nursing homes are bad places? Not necessarily. I know there are people who truly need this kind of care, who have no other option. But what I learned, in the worst way possible, is that there are alternatives. Having a caregiver at home, adapting the environment to make it safer, seeking family support, all of these are possibilities that could have allowed me to continue living with dignity, without having to give up who I am. But when I realized it, it was already too late. Now, all I can do is share my story and hope that you, who are listening to this, don't make the same mistake. If you still have the option to choose, fight to maintain your autonomy for as long as possible. Choose to stay in your space, close to your memories, your routines, the things that make you feel alive. Because, in the end, what really matters isn't just being safe, but continuing to be the owner of your own life. If this reflection made you think, leave your comment and share this message with someone who might need to hear it. Your life is worth more than just existing. Fight to live it to the fullest in your own way. My homeopathy can help you with that. Just check the pinned comment.